Attention, privates, hands off socks and on your cocks. It's the Deep Trench podcast. I'm your host, Stoney, and I'm joined, as always, by Welshy.
Welcome to the year 1.9k.
And no Matt. That's right, it's me and Welshy getting stuck into the trenches, and we're going to do a little Deep Trench podcast here about the good old game of Trench Crusade. Maybe touch on a couple of other new games that are coming out that are alternatives to our beloved Warhammer 40,000. So forget about Warhammer. It's dead to us on this show. It's only the deep, muddy trenches of New Antioch.
So yeah, this is a big new game that's just finished launching on Kickstarter that I knew nothing about before you actually sent it over to me, Stoney. That's, I mean, I'm getting ahead of ourselves. I think if we say it's shaping up to rival Games Workshop, but it's a new tabletop miniatures-based game that's heavily influenced by the Grimdark and even includes people that have previously worked on game design for Games Workshop, right?
That's right. And I know what you're thinking. When you hear us say something like that, you think like, oh, this is going to be some flash in the pan game that disappears in like 3 months or whatever, because there's been so many in the past that have done almost exactly this. I don't know if you remember the game Dorado back from like 2010 sort of time, but that was a game that had a very similar premise and very similar cool models and just got completely washed under the carpet. Whereas now, we've got something that's made some serious waves, and it's Trench Crusade. I think it was three
Yeah, I
million
mean,
quid, 3 million quid or something they raised, and
yeah,
they
I think
tried
they
to raise
got,
like 60
I think it was,
grand. I think they wanted to
yeah,
get.
they got 50 times. What I've read was they got 50 times what they'd asked for on
Now,
Kickstarter.
yeah,
So,
so
I
people are
mean, there's a
obviously
lot of
interested.
interest
Yeah,
in it.
but
Yeah.
they really did.
Um,
The way I found out about it was particularly on like my 3D model printing sites and stuff.
mm,
I just started seeing these images of some of these models filtering through, and they had no real context to them. No one said this is from Trench Crusade, this is what it is. And I was just every single one of them I saw. Like quite often, if I see a cool image like that, I'll save it, you know. And so
yeah.
I had some images that I'd saved, and I just kept seeing these ones. I was like, oh man, whoever I thought like whoever's doing these conversions or something's doing like a really good job, you know, like there's some really cool style to these. And then just eventually sort of worked out like, hang on, all these pictures that I'm saving that I think are cool are all from this new game called Trench Crusade. And then, you know,
Yeah.
that's kind of how it just was discovered for me. But every single one
Well,
of the models
I
has been
think
pretty much a banger.
that's what I think means that it's probably got greater credence than, like you say, some of those other flash in the pan games, is that it's
Mm.
heavily kind of up and coming from the community at large. Like the concept has existed for a while and people have been running with it just as a cool concept before it even became like let's make a straight up game
Mm.
rule set and sell it as a thing. And I think that community aspect is what we'll probably talk about a bit more after we've actually told the listeners what it's based on. But at the moment, as far as they're aware, this is an amorphous community-driven project of cool models. So, Stoney,
Yeah.
what are the models based in? Why are they cool?
Well, I'd like to start this particular part of the show by prefacing. There was a comment we got on a YouTube video not too long ago that was like, "Oh, a drinking game idea would be to take a shot every time either Stoney or Matt don't know what they're fucking talking about." And if that guy's listening, then he's going to be doing a lot of shots because I listen. We have a very tenuous grasp of the Tenth Crusade lore, but as far as I can tell, it all starts with the Templars, that full guy of so many stories, the Dan Brown aficionados that, you know, that they've been a cat, they've been used for so many different things, haven't they? But now they're back again up to their own tricks. And in this one,
In
they've like
1099
in
is the date.
10.99, baby. The price of an average pint in London these days, I hear. So end up open. They go into some temple and they find like an artifact or something in the ruins that's like some demon artifact, and they start communing with a demon and get all freaky. And that's the original heresy, I think it's called.
Yeah, I mean that leads to the gate of hell itself opening. So
Oh,
importantly, this is the Templars on the First Crusade in Jerusalem. So they're in
oh yes.
Jerusalem. and they've done the first act of ultimate heresy, it's referred to, which
Mm,
basically means they've fiddled around, they've got there, they've not been very Templary, they've had a fiddle round with a doorknob, and their funny handshakes aren't enough to save them because they've opened the literal gate to hell.
mm.
And that's the starting point for the game.
It is. And we should probably also mention that this is an alternative history game, which is an incredibly annoying phrase that you'll hear in every single description of Trench Crusade. And like honestly, doing any kind of research or anything, you're just going to hear the phrase alternative history so much it's going to lose pretty much all meaning. But that's what this is.
But it's very much that, isn't it? That it is if you look at the lore sampler, so the full rule book and kind of lore book isn't out yet, is it? All of this stuff is still in playtest mode, I
Yes,
believe.
which you can get
Um,
the rules for free from the Trench Crusade website. So if you are interested,
yeah.
then you can just go and pick them up and have a play.
And on that same website is the lore sampler, and the very first page of that kind of lore sampler background is literally a timeline. It's a timeline that takes you through this alternate history from 1099 through the various battles with the demons that come out, the fallout within the religious sects,
Mm,
the fact that there is still a sultanate, like an Islamic component to this whole story that kind of walls themselves in from the demons, you know, because this is happening in the Middle East. And it fast forwards through all of that to 1914, which is the year the game is actually set. So you've got to let your imagination run wild and think demons released in 1099, world very, very religious, still religious in 1914, but you've got World War One trench warfare, but instead of human versus human, it's religious humans versus demon hosts,
mm.
which is that is in essence what the
And
game is, right?
dickhead heretic humans, because isn't it? It's something like
That is true.
is it like a whole third of the world or something? I can't remember what it is. Again, take a shot, mate. But like, I can't turn like willingly to the demonic forces and go on like a kind of a pilgrimage to hell itself to become a horrible heretic guardsman, essentially.
Yeah. I mean, dare we say it, and I'm sure we'll draw many parallels from the very little we actually know about the full lore of the game to Games Workshop. But it's essentially Imperium and Chaos versus
What?
each other.
Whoa!
Whoa, hang
Yeah,
on, hold
yeah.
up.
I mean, it is. I think the funny thing about this is that it basically rips off the same material that Warhammer 40,000 ripped off. It's all like Milton and stuff like that, but it's really just a lot more on the nose. Like one of the things that the
Mm,
heretics have to do is like the sort of the higher rank in the heretic army, it sort of depends on how far through hell you can go. Like
yeah.
you go, and if you're a real bastard, you could go all the way to like the nine circles and all this kind of stuff, which is from the Dante stuff and all that kind of thing. So it all pulls on the same awesome stories from the past, which they've just decided to make into, well, in their case, an alternative history where maybe you could say that Warhammer is just an alternative future. Who knows? But it is
Yeah.
what it is.
You could probably say it's an alternative future based heavily on history. That's how I
Yeah,
describe
yeah.
40k or historical events. But some of the history is wild. I mean, there's a lot to it already. There's a lot of fan additions to it, but there's a lot of official stuff in this lore primer. Some of the things that happen in the dates really are wonderful. I've just got the old timeline up. And at 1477, the entire city of Argos is taken by God. That's the entrance. There's nothing more. The city is entirely consumed by God, which is just like a
Yeah.
wonderful phrase to get your teeth into and start
Mm,
imagining around it. Because we know from all of the 40k lore, right, that especially for us, I mean, the biggest seams of riches for us on the podcast are the mysteries, right? What happened to the two
mm.
missing legions, etc. And there's maybe because it's early days and it's not fully developed, but this alternate history certainly gives you a lot of room to make your own imaginings of what's happening around it, which I think is enticing in itself.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's already doing the classic. Warhammer thing of like hinting at bigger things that they haven't released models for and stuff yet. Like one of the things I'm very excited about is they keep talking about the naval combat aspects. And we've
Mm,
always said on this show so many times, like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if there was underwater space marines or something like that? And these guys, and it's a brilliant gap in the market to try to fill because, like we say, it's something that it, any tabletop war game is going to get compared to 40k or Games Workshop stuff. Even more so when it's about kind of good versus evil coming out of the warp or whatever on Earth, maybe. But I think that the
mm,
execution is really where the difference is because it is incredibly different to the 40k stuff. And I think one of the stuff, a big part of it as well, is it's really kind of some of it's really gory and a really nasty. There's some really
mm.
nasty models. Like, is it the Chlorister or the Clarister or something? He's like holding his own head, and he's got like veins coming out of his
Yeah,
neck hole, making weird shapes, kind of thing. A bit like a Teletubby, like the top of a Teletubby, the antenna on the top of a Teletubby, but it's just coming out of his neck. So yeah, that I mean
yeah.
that's fucking cool as shit, and it's very and we know, yeah, sure, Games Workshop have got some of those models, but they've also got for every one cool grim dark gory model they've got 10 cutesy elves. So it's
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, it is worth dwelling on that a bit. If you look at any of the artwork for Trench Crusade, again, all of it's on that website. I think it's one of the things that's appealing to old school 40k players like us that you'll often hear us in episodes. We try not to do it too often, but we do end up pining for the olden days of grim dark. You know, we often say, "Oh, it's too cartoony," or "It's looking too mainstream. It's not as grotesque and horrible as it used to be." Well, this game certainly is. It really runs with that, and it runs, I'd say, certainly more overtly occult influenced than 40k.
oh
I know
yeah,
you can dig down and see the occult in 40k, but this is
yeah. I mean,
full
it
on.
straight up has satanic symbols on. Not
Yeah.
even like, oh, I'm pretending to be anything. It's like literally like it's way more on the nose, but it's you can tell that it's leaning in to
Mm.
that stuff. Like obviously, it's doing it to be more a bit more outlandish and stuff. And I think that, and I've talked about this in a bit in a video that I'm making. Hopefully, that's coming up if Trench Crusade don't sue me. Apparently, and it's there's a real danger, I think, of this, of like it being way too much, and and everything that we're saying almost makes it sound like it's way too much as well. Like they're really leaning into the gory aspect of it. It's like World War I demons that have come out. It's the World War I mixed with the kind of medieval setting is a bit like putting a hat on a hat. It's these two things that we both
Yeah.
understand as bit when you think of grimdark's times, those are two of the things that we sort of hang our sort of ideas on, aren't they? They're both these kind of
Yeah.
really super grim dark influenced times. So doing them both together, it's in many ways, if I'd heard someone pitch this in a meeting or something, I would be like super wary of it. I'd be like, what, you want to make like you want to mix hip hop and metal music together? You're mad, Fred Durst. That sounds crazy. And then he'd come out and play break stuff, and I'd be like, you know what? You hit it just right, baby. You did it. You
Yeah.
did it. And that's kind of what's happened with the Trench Crusade. It's like, it sounds like a crazy idea, but actually, it kind of just works.
I definitely agree with you. I'd say that you could even add to the hat because when you look at it, more detail at some of the factions, not only have you got like World War I on top of the demons, on top of the occult, they also like there's a whole faction, isn't there, that's called the Black Grail, which is
Oh yeah.
essentially the Black Death, like the plague. You've also
Mm.
like based an entire faction in this game on the concept of the plague. And then not only do you have that faction, but when it originally rears its head in the historical timeline, it's chased away by Joan of Arc's
Mm.
riding faith in the Lord, drives the
I
Black
did.
Grail plague out of
I
Europe.
didn't even read
Hats
that.
upon
That's
hats
cool as
upon
shit.
hats.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, definitely. Yeah,
She's
I mean
not.
that.
Yeah, it's like Jean d'Arc or
Oh
something
yeah,
like that. But
classic.
it's like it's
Oh man. I mean, again, it's I think that the fact that they've got this kind of pestilence guy, I think it's Beelzebub, is
yeah,
their
it
is
is.
their guy because there's this big court of demons, and they all sort of try to get into power. They're always fighting each other to get into power. This is nothing like Warhammer. Don't worry about that. They're always trying to get into power. And the ones that do, like, I think there's a court of 7 of them. I think, I don't know, another
Yeah.
shot. But like whoever's and like they all have kind of like different things that they do. And his thing is basically nothing like Nurgle. Don't worry about that. It's definitely not Nurgly. But I mean, again, but it's just done in such a cool and different way. And it's not like Nurgle owns disease. There's no, even though we say there's similarities, there's not going to be a court case here, is there? It's not like ripping it
No,
off. Yeah.
I think some of the, if you take that one faction as an example, well, I suppose we'll get into the factions in a minute, but that Black Grail Nurgle-esque plague faction, I'd say is what anybody that you see converting the most grimdark Nurgle
Mm.
models possible
Yeah.
wants these models.
Oh, absolutely.
That
I mean,
is
that's it.
like they are pre-converted to grimdark for
That's the
you.
genius of it. Is so many of these models can just go. You could just sneak over to your existing Chaos Warband or whatever it is. So yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
and I think it's probably worth mentioning like why that is. So the three guys that designed this, Mike Francina, he worked on Diablo, the game. He's also worked on Exile, Magic, the Gathering. So that's kind of his influence from that side. The game designer, so the rules guy, Thomas Pirinen, I've probably butchered his name. He worked on one of your favorite Games Workshop IPs, mate, Mordheim.
Yeah,
So he
that's
was the
right.
games designer for that, as well as 6th edition Warhammer Fantasy, which I never played much fantasy, but I've heard that was one of the good ones.
All right.
So
Oh,
that's
okay.
always
Oh, that's
promising.
good. I thought that it was 6th edition 40K had worked on, which was a shit one. So I was a bit like, oh, at least
No,
he's 50-50 on those. But if he's done a good edition, then that's
I
solid.
think it's fantasy. I might be wrong. What I researched just said Warhammer 6th edition, so I
Mm.
guess you could interpret it
Yeah,
either way.
sure, could
But
be, but
but I
probably
think
yeah.
it's that one that was between Hero Hammer and Death Star units that seemed to
Mm.
have the balance a bit better, which was
Mm.
good. And then the third guy involved, like in the main creation team for this, a guy called James Sheriff, who works on 28 Mag, which has existed for a while now. In fact, me and Matt have been it. We entered a competition for them. I've been in the
Mm.
28 Mag, one of my models,
Mm.
which was a kind of fan-made magazine looking at the grim dark, and it had some crossovers with 40K. It was never
That's
Games
right.
Workshop licensed,
No,
but it was fans making the most. Well, I
they've
guess
just
it
got
started
a
as a kind of Blanchitsu
they've
love
actually got
affair.
a Kickstarter going on at the moment for to have
Mm.
some models made. So if you followed 28 Mag, you might have listened to the show, but it's definitely worth checking out or looking at their Kickstarter if you want to support them because they've got some really cool models on there actually.
Yeah,
Um,
and that design style, if you've ever seen a cover of 28 Mag, is clearly in
mm,
in this new Trench Crusade IP. So it's got a like the guys behind it really are on that dark side rather than cartoon side of the fence, I think.
yeah, I agree. But yeah, it's definitely the thing that really jumps out and makes you just that initially smacked me in the face was just it's just such a different design philosophy for what we've come to expect from Games Workshop now, and it's not saying that the Games Workshop design philosophy is bad, but this is just new and different and exciting, and we like it.
Base.
I do hope that it lasts the test of time. You know, I think
Mm.
we've talked about this before, and I'm sure I've said this on the show before, but I hope it's not a doom free type scenario where just like it just becomes grating, like just the kind of the setting, the kind of the
Yeah.
oppressive setting can become a
There's
bit
only so
much.
much you can listen to the Mick Gordon riff before it becomes mind-numbing.
Exactly. And there's a lot of, we're probably not going to talk massively about the lore, I guess, but pretty much all the machines and everything that I was reading about, or like there's this helmet that they wear to like listen to the voice of God and all this kind of stuff. There's some people that could hear the voice of God, and it just means that they're always in excruciating pain, but they're kind of happy about it because they get to hear God's voice. And then there's a big kind of walking church thing that walks around the battlefield. And guess what's inside there? A monk being covered in spikes, but he's happy about it because he gets to experience the pain of like. And that's the other thing. And he's got a shield which has got a Catherine wheel on it. And every day the faithful come out and want to be sacrificed on it because they can feel happy about feeling the pain for God. It's just always
Yeah.
about people just being like. So in a way, I mean, you know, obviously maybe some mental gymnastics on the part of the people in Trench Crusade here, but like in a way, it's kind of a happy place because everybody there is like into just like being like pain and suffering, and like being a kind of a penitent. So they're maybe in a way they're all kind of like they look at Trench Crusade and they're like, mate, this is like fluffy unicorn town, you know. Whereas we look at it and we're like, this is the grimmest, darkest thing we've ever seen.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is where any friction with this in the future will be, is the friction between the art and the description, right? Because
Mm,
it's the art that pulls you in. If you're interested in Grimdark, you see the art and you see the model, you think that's fucking cool.
mm,
But how many model releases can there be before you're bored of that style? Would be my worry for it. I'm certainly not bored of it yet, and I
mm.
want a lot more.
Yeah,
And I love all of the genuine, like, historical reference stuff. I love
mm,
all of that fake alternate history. Like,
definitely.
I
And
love it when I find it in 40K. I love it that it's so on the surface level here. But
yeah,
I do worry that maybe they've hemmed themselves in quite one note with by kind of implying that all of the kind of Eastern religion stuff. You know, if you live in a
mm.
world where clearly there is the Abrahamic God and there are demons, like what happens to Hinduism, what happens to Buddhism, what happens to all that other
Well,
culture
I think
is an
there
interesting
is
thing to explore.
definitely, and they have because obviously it's a world war that they're doing, and they have definitely suggested because they've just broken another tier, I think, where they were going to release like
Yeah.
some Jesuits or something like a new
Okay.
faction because they released a new faction, the Red Brigade or something like
Yeah.
that, that was like a just a squad of they're just like sort of badass. The law behind them felt a little flaky and bit like, hey, we've just got an extra like 10 grand to burn. Let's make a new fucking faction or
Yeah.
whatever. But they're cool models, definitely. Because I guess one of the temptations could be is for them to just be like go super edge lord with it and just be like, well, you haven't seen anything yet. We're just going to get even grosser and grimmer and darker and blah 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 blah. But actually, they've got like decent ideas, like hey, naval stuff. Who knows? Maybe they'll make some cool flyers or something. You know, jetpack guys, all this kind of thing. So I
Yeah.
definitely, I'm not, I'm definitely not sick of it yet.
No. Well, should we mention just go through the main factions then and kind of what they
Let's
are
do
and
it.
what we think?
Let's
Maybe
drop some
decide which
actual
one
knowledge, some
we'd
lore.
collect. We'd
That's
collect
right.
if, well, I say if, it's probably more a when at this stage,
Mm.
but we'll get on to how you get models in a bit because I think that's part of what makes the game so interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But we've got the Trench Pilgrims, right, which is your Catherine wheel you just mentioned.
Yeah.
This is the Catholics, as far as I'm concerned. This is Repentia on overload. If you've ever wanted a whole army of Sisters Repentia, these are the guys for you.
Yeah. But they're also kind of, they're like very, I think they're like sort of peasants as well, aren't they? A lot of them. They're just kind of like,
I think so. They're not
um,
wealthy. They just want to be seen to be great in the eyes of God, right?
yeah,
And make up for any penance they have.
that's right. They wear these big pointy hats that makes everything super chill, a bit like I was just saying, where they can face down demons and stuff with no fear because they've got this helmet on that's somehow
Yeah,
just
faith
making
is
them
their
chill.
shield.
Faith is their shield, exactly.
Yeah, so they are cool, and I think if you out of the, I suppose, good guys in
Mm-hmm.
this scenario, unless you're a Satanist, maybe, they are the kind of most up to 11 of the good guys, I'd say.
Mm. Yeah, I do. I really like this faction. This was one of the ones that I was sort of slightly tempted to maybe collect if I was going to do it. I think they're again sort of maybe the most on the nose of the brief, where they look
Hmm.
super kind of like half a sort of medieval peasant, half a kind of a World War I soldier, but also with a cool kind of pyramid head style weird helmet. And there's one thing I love, it's
Yeah,
a weird helmet.
yeah, it's like they're wearing 40K scenery. That's
It
that's
is,
so,
yeah, it's
you want to
quite like
if you
that.
imagine the Gothic architecture turned into clothing,
Mm.
that these are the guys for you if you reckon you'd be up for some flying buttresses for shoulder pads. So the next guys are the ones you alluded to earlier, Stoney, the Heretic Legion. So these are
Mhm.
the humans that have fallen to, I almost said chaos there, but Satan, I think, is
Mhm.
probably the forces of hell.
Yeah,
They've
yeah,
fallen to the allure of hell, right?
yeah. No, and yeah, I mean these are a cool faction as well. So this sort of makes up the majority of the sort of hell faction on Earth, I think. because they're sort of dudes and ladies that have fallen to hell and yeah, live in a weird place. Like, oh, I was reading a story that had some descriptions about the sort of the fallen lands, because like it's not all happening in hell. There's all these like it's all like a fallen land around. It's
Yeah, hell
basically
is
like,
spewed out into reality,
yeah,
basically.
made a place called Chaos Town, or no, I mean it's just called like it's just like hell on earth, basically. And there
Yeah.
was all these descriptions about these like basically where the heretics live, and they have all these markets where they sell human flesh by the pound to eat, and like all this, and they just like throw babies into volcanoes and shit like that. It's all pretty wild. Yeah, so they're your kind
The
of classic
standard
guys.
troops for these guys as well are like Krieg zombies, right? They're like the if you turn Krieg into zombies, that's what you've got.
Oh yeah, definitely, yeah, very
If Matt
creepy
was here,
zombie.
he'd be arguing the toss over all kinds of
I
different
think they
uniform.
would.
But as
I
far as a
actually,
normal person's concerned, they're
yeah,
gas
actually,
mask wearing trench
as
dudes.
Matt isn't here, I would like just to point out that he's the guy that told me all the Trench Crusade facts. So anything that's wrong, blame Matt. Uh, but
uh,
but yeah, I think that he would definitely be um defending Games Workshop's honor here, as in this is another one of those kind of like, oh, it's definitely not Nurgle. But like I say, they're pulling from the same thing, aren't they? The Krieg are a definite reference to World War One soldiers, so obviously these
yeah,
guys are as well.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So just on those two, Stoney, as the two main forces of
Mm-hmm.
good versus evil. In 40k, you're a chaos player.
Mm-hmm.
Does the grim darkness of the good guys in this make you switch, or do you think in
I
this
yeah,
you would stick to the heretics?
I really like the good guys in this because I like all the religious symbology stuff, and also I've done quite a lot of like chaosy things over the years, So
Hmm.
this is, but then this is a nice way for a solid chaos player like myself to dabble in the realms of godly men. So they're two really cool factions. There's just models that I love in all of
Yeah.
it, and like as I'm definitely tempted to play this game, and this is from someone that it does a Warhammer 40,000 podcast, and I can't remember the last time I played a game of Warhammer 40,000. It's just a time thing, really, Warhammer 40,000 for me.
For particularly in this game, because I looked at the rules, I might mention them in a bit, but just to see like how many models you get for points in a standard
Mm,
game, and it does look like you're going to be probably between 15 and 20 models on the board,
yeah,
not units, models. So it's definitely manageable in size
definitely.
for people to pick
Yeah.
up and play. It's
And the
kill team
boxes
sized.
and the boxes seem pretty reasonably priced for the amount of models you get.
And one of the models in for the Heretic Legion that I know has really inspired you because you've got some variations or inspired by it coming up on our Cults 3D at some point is that artillery witch.
Oh yeah. No, I love the artillery witch. I think it's just such an instant classic model. It just really is. It's one of the models that I said like I saw and was just like, wow, what's this? What's going on here? Is this some
Yeah.
kind of conversion from like when I first saw it, I thought it was a conversion from like a historical model that someone had like put a bomb on or something like that. But
Yeah.
but yeah, it's
Well,
just
but
and it's such
if
a
you
cool
haven't seen
idea.
it, if you just listen to this and you've got no idea of Trench Crusades, go away and look it up because it's cool.
Hmm.
But it's essentially it's a sorcerer that's called a giant that calls bombs into being,
Yeah.
right? It's a
So
sorcerer that doesn't use magic. It uses magic in the
that's
form
right.
of
Well,
artillery shells.
rather than having tanks and stuff, they basically just have a munitions factory in hell churning out all these horrible missiles. And rather than like shoot them out of a cannon, they have like a lady open up a portal and just basically chuck a missile at whatever it is needs a missile chucked at. And they're called artillery witches. And yeah,
Yeah.
it's a very cool model. There's some really cool models actually in that Heretics box set. I really like the Commandos as well,
Yeah.
um, which are
Yeah, the Death
guys,
Commandos with the
Death
mask and the kind of
Commandos.
big claw arms. Their
Yeah,
arms are too
yeah,
long, right?
that's
They're like
right.
lower arms are way too
There's
long.
some really that's one of the really cool things that I like about the Trench Crusade demons is all their weird arm proportions and crazy fingers. That's really cool, I think. But one
Yeah.
the law for them is they're like taken as babies. They're born in the kind of the hell area and taken as babies deep into the hell part, like beyond the gates,
Yeah.
and they're taught by all the kind of worst killers in hell about like the best way to kill people, and they come out as these kind of assassins.
It's
Yeah,
definitely nothing like the Officio Assassinor.
absolutely. Don't worry about that. Nothing like that. But
All
it's
right.
pretty cool.
So the next faction then, Stoney, is the New Antioch faction, and
Mm.
to me, these are if the others were the Catholics, these are the Protestants. They're the little bit more sensible armor
Well,
wearing
I'll tell
fellas.
you what they're not Welshy, and that's Space
Yeah.
Marines, okay? And they're definitely not influenced by Space Marines, and I don't want to hear nothing, no one say otherwise. But these guys, yeah, these are the guys that get all the funding, basically, aren't they?
Yeah.
They get all the money from the church. That New Antioch is like a place that's holding out. It's kind of like the
It's like a
big cap,
bastion
yeah,
city.
and it's kind of like a capital city. I read some really cool descriptions about it,
Yeah.
where because everybody flocks there from around the world. So there's all these that you might hear like a preacher saying like, "Oh, Ethiopian pilgrims are the best," or like all of this, basically trying to rent themselves out to like go on some kind of crusade, or like all these different everyone from around the world, all the faithful from around the world go there and kind of try to prove how faithful they are. But it's a bit more
Yeah.
like what you'd consider a normal city in a way. It's just sort of a busy hub of humanity where you
Yeah.
don't have to like strap yourself into some kind of pain device to live or do. So it's a bit of a respite from the grim dark.
Exactly. The warband is made up of priests that are just in robes without metal sarcophagi to walk around in.
Mm-hmm.
And as you say, Stoney, I think that the heavy mechanized
The
troops
heavy
they've called them,
mechanized troops, yeah.
they I'd say that they're much more akin to Fallout. They look
Yes,
a
they are
lot
like
like
that.
the
Yeah.
Fallout
You know,
design.
I fucking love these models. I think the design is so cool because
Yeah.
you're right, but they kind of look like an Airfix kit or something, the way
Yeah.
they've been kind of bashed, like someone's kit bashed an Airfix kit for like a Spitfire or something, because
Yeah.
they've just got all these beautiful like lines. The whole thing looks like it's that kind of stamped metal, like it was from, maybe even like pre-Fallout. Really, it's everything.
With those
It really looks like a kind of a prototype weapon that might have been designed by the OSO or something. Like back in the
yeah.
in the
Well, they've got those rivets that are not they're like set down, aren't they? Like rivets in a kind of
mm,
deep pocket rather than just on
yeah.
the outside that adds that kind of feel to it of like
Yeah, like some kind of
old-fashioned
factory
engineering.
made, like and yeah, and the gun and everything's got that weird kind of housing to it with the sort of divoted metal and everything. It's just like it's a really, really good model. And again, I remember almost like seeing the artwork for this and being kind of and thinking like, oh, this is some kind of really cool concept art for something. I'd love to see it, but I didn't realize again was a cool model. And yeah, I love that. But to be honest with you, the rest of the new Antioch range is a little boring because they are kind of more or less just dudes, aren't they?
Yeah, they got like sniper priests and other kind of
Oh, are
priests
they the
and
sniper
other
priest
dudes.
guys? I do quite like the
They
sniper
got the
priests.
sniper priests,
Yeah.
yeah, but they are just. I think they've hit again, as with all the models in this, hit the brief exactly of what they're
Mm.
after. But they are priests with guns at the end of the day,
Yeah.
which is is cool, but
Yeah.
not as
Not
cool as
40k. Not
people
40k.
flaying themselves whilst they
No,
walk
no,
into battle.
no.
Um, all right, so next up then, Stoney, if the new Antioch was the kind of glimmering light city of good
Mhm.
and God, you've got the city of Dis, the
Oh,
Iron
yes.
City of Dis,
That's
which is
right.
where you'd find the court of the seven-headed serpent.
Oh, yes.
So these are
Yes.
the real demony dudes.
Yeah, these are very demony and are very, very on the nose as well. Like the sorcerer is basically Baphomet. They've
Yeah.
got like I can't remember who it is. They've got a really cool demon model, the guy with wings. That's fucking crazy, that model. It's got all like mouths all over the wings and stuff. Um,
Yeah, it's called the Practor.
the Practor, he's very good.
Yeah. It's called the Praetor.
The Praetor, that's right. He's very good. And they've got like Hell Knights and all this cool stuff. Yeah, it's a really cool thing. I forgot, something that I'm just remembering now that I'd kind of forgotten is
Yeah.
and again, this is nothing like 40k, but there's this thing, isn't there, where they make in New Antioch, they make cool ass, big ass, definitely not Space Marine type dudes by getting the cloned flesh of Jesus Christ and getting people to eat it, and it kind of makes them into these like super hench, big ass dudes of a Mecha Christ, they call it.
Those are the paladins, right?
And then they make these paladin guys, or is it that go into hell? Is this the thing?
Yeah, these are the
Um,
guys that are like so they've been touched by like the flesh of actual Christ so they
mm,
can walk into the kind of circles of hell and
they can
do
go
some
into
damage.
yeah. So they go in on missions to like recover artifacts and stuff like that. And I think they started off as 12 of them. One of them definitely like might have turned to chaos, and then two of them died or something like that. And
Yeah.
they're a bit Primarch esque, but they're just kind of like these uber hench guys. They've got this kind of cool armor, which is made from some kind of material which you can only get from Jerusalem. So they can't get it anymore because Jerusalem has fallen because it's where the demon door was. So they have to they have to kind of like maintain their armor. There's like this kind of holy relic, this sort of again this medieval stuff being mixed in with the kind of newer age things.
That's
Um,
right. They call them the Metachrist program, is what makes them.
yeah, which is yeah, like we say, so it's a bit like the Holy Communion, except you actually a bit of barbecue Jesus, and it makes you it's basically like roids.
So I guess they are like, because you've just mentioned that this faction, the Seven-Headed Serpent, has these Hell Knights, which are the kind of big, beefy bad guys in armor. The Paladins are the big, beefy good guys in armor, right? So
Mm,
you'd imagine that these guys are going fairly toe to toe on the tabletop. Other things in that Seven-Headed Serpent, I think's really cool. You mentioned the sorcerer being quite on the nose because he's literally got the one hand up, one hand down. If you've
mm.
ever seen like a picture of, someone's ever told, if you ever listened to Stoney's occult section, then you'll notice at least seven references to things he said in this
Yeah,
one
yeah,
single model.
exactly. Yeah, yeah,
There's crescent moons, there's hands up and down, there's flaming daggers. There's literally, he looks to be holding like the Ten Commandments in one
yeah,
arm,
yeah.
some
I
kind of
love that.
like this.
It's funny. It's like he's accepting an Employee of the Month award because he's just got like tucked under
Yeah.
his arm, like, "Hey, check it out. Oh, what this old
Yeah.
thing? Yeah, that's right. I'm Hell's Employee of the Month." But those tablets are actually super important because that's where they get their power from. Because they do like a
Yeah.
kind of a Moses thing where they like go up to the top of a mountain and get that thing, that tablet, and it's got all the spells written on it or some shit, and then they
Oh,
can become a
nice.
sorcerer. Yeah.
They also got the Hunter of the Left Hand Path, who's got this like his entire left arm is some kind of flesh bow and arrow, which
Mm.
is wonderful. They're really cool out there. If there's some things we've mentioned that are very similar to other IPs, I'd say that this is the most kind of inventive and
Oh,
new.
super
Like,
out
there's a
there.
lot of
Yeah.
heavy kind of Zeech styling, but that's because it's
No, but it's
inspired by the same stuff. It's the same
yeah,
original concept.
it's I think it's super out there. They've got some really cool stuff. Like we say, even things like we say how they've just changed the proportions of the demons, like having the really long forearms and fingers. It just makes them so
Yeah.
creepy and weird and different from other demons, you know. So I do think it's so in today's world, right? It's difficult to make something truly new, right? Do you know what I mean? And I
Yeah.
think that
Yeah,
actually
yeah,
they have made something truly new with all of this stuff. So
for
yeah, I
sure.
think it's good.
All right, so two factions left then. The next one's the Sultanate of the Iron Wall. So
Mm,
these guys live behind the Iron Wall of Al Quraysh, um, which and they are essentially the Islamic state within this alternate history future, right?
mm,
So they're still in mosques made of marble and gold. They still pray for the success of the Sultan, and I think the kind of design aspect for this comes from more that golden age of Islamic invention and technology. You know, when
mm.
the that empire had cannons and gunpowder, or were making use of kind of
Yeah,
different types of weaponry, different swords, different explosives, more kind of ornate styling than
mm,
anything else. It is very inspired by that, mixed with the kind of mythology that comes along with that, like the kind of, it's not quite genie, but the genie are inspired by the jinn with a D and
yeah,
J, and it's got that kind of mysticism behind it, right? This Middle Eastern
definitely.
mysticism.
Yeah, definitely. Which is kind of an entirely different branch of mysticism to kind of Western mysticism. But I'm definitely in Islam. There's some bits and pieces interesting to do with that, and they've got things like these iron bulls, don't they? Which are kind of
Yeah, the
constructs.
brazen bull.
Yeah, which are like these constructs that they've made that are kind of a bit like dreadnoughts,
Yeah,
effectively, aren't they? And what they and it can look like anything, right? They're sort of made by these scientists, these kind of sort of almost kind of like their science is a bit sort of on the line, though, isn't it? Like, I think, but other people think it's a bit like, hang on, what are they actually doing down there? Because it's a bit like, oh, you've created a massive, weird war machine with looks a bit like a rhino with a gun for an arm. How did that happen?
Yeah, I definitely think although their main enemy is the same,
Hmm.
if your shield is faith and you're getting powered from sticking needles in your eyes, you're going to be a bit concerned by the guy that seems to be doing magic spells, talking in a different language to you to power a big giant golden bull.
Hmm.
When like the heretics you've been fighting for ages are kneeling at like the foot of the golden calf, and
Right.
suddenly there's a big old like magic animated bull. You might think, whose side are these guys on, right?
Yeah, no, definitely. It does seem a little bit magical there, I guess. But like you
Yeah.
say, I mean, at the same time, who are you to judge what's magical when you're riding around in a machine that's being powered by poking you with needles or whatever?
Yeah,
So who knows?
exactly.
Who knows? But
The models I really like for these guys are the Janissaries. So they're
mm,
like straight up, they just look like Janissaries did, and you
mm,
can imagine them doing like spinning into the battle
yeah,
with
I
their
really
swords and
like this
shields and their
range.
big hats.
Yeah, this is another range that I was very tempted by. I like their sort of assassin model as well. It's one of the very
Yeah,
few action models in the entire Trench Crusade range that's doing
that's
something
true actually.
actiony.
Yeah, he's in
Mm,
a real kind of running pose. I really like the Azebs as well, which seem to be their kind of ground troops. They're very Lawrence of Arabia style. They've got the turbans on wrapped around
mm.
their face. They look a lot they're very Talan, the old Talan
That's
range, that
right.
kind
Yeah,
of I mean it's set on the same stuff, but
absolutely.
yeah,
If
it's
you like
cool.
the Talon range and you wanted to get these and put a bolter in, then yeah, you could
Yeah,
definitely
that's
do
true.
that. I think
For
that is
sure.
kind of we're sort of saying, oh, maybe it doesn't like it's a negative thing that it's the similarities that it has to some of the Games Workshop ranges, but you do wonder if maybe it was a bit calculated to be like, we'll get them
Yeah.
buying these models, like either
Because
way.
Games Workshop ain't ever, you've heard it here
Mm.
first, ain't ever gonna re-release the Talan, that's for
No.
sure. So the final ones then, Stoney, is the Black Grail, which we mentioned a bit earlier,
Oh yeah,
which is the disease and plague inspired, led
sort
by
of nurgly.
Beelzebub.
Yeah.
Um, Nurgle with a much heavier emphasis on flies,
Yeah,
I would say.
I love this range. The only reason why I wouldn't get this is because I've had a Nurgle army in the past. But like, what's
Yeah,
it? I think it's called the Lord of Boils or something like
yeah.
that. Who's basically just a guy. No, what's it
Lord of
called? The Lord of
Tumors,
Tumors.
Lord of
That's it.
Tumors.
Yeah,
Yeah,
who's just basically covered in these fucking tumors, and they're so gross. And he's got two little guys with him. One of them's literally collecting the pus out of a tumor
he's
with a
got a
big
little dish,
bowl.
hasn't he, at the back?
Oh,
Yeah,
it's so grim. It's one of the grossest models, but it's fucking cool as shit. And
they are the coolest for me. They're the coolest sculpt because you got him, you got
mm,
this amalgam, which is like I don't imagine an obliterator crossed with pick any end of level Resident Evil boss
yeah,
where all of the like dead flesh
definitely
becomes
looks
one
like that.
thing.
Yeah.
Um, and the Grail Hounds as well, with these big
Mm.
swollen like testicle
Yeah, they're
sacks.
so weird. Halfway between a mosquito and a testicle dog. Yeah, they're
Yeah,
so bizarre. And also one of the cool ones they have is the Plague Knight, which I think is
yeah.
a really, really cool model, which is the kind of the sort of in knight's armor, but it looks like a kind of a weird fly. The models, the
Well,
helmet's
it's
got a
got
weird like
the
proboscis
it's
and the
the it's a
wings.
proboscis crossed with the so that's the old plague mask where they used
Mm.
to put
Oh
the
yeah,
posies,
yeah, yeah.
so because they used to think that dried flowers would
That
stop you getting the
smell would,
plague.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, that's good smells were good for you,
yeah.
and that's where the song comes from as well, isn't it?
Mm.
But yeah, these guys are all in nobles of the Order of the Fly, and it's all yeah, it's all great. And those are the factions that are the main ones, right? We've covered it all there. There's a little bit of something for everyone. If you want shiny, high-tech people, they exist. If you
Mm.
want the most grotesque people, they exist. If you want the most magic people or the most repentant people, or if you're just a straight down the line American, you're gonna get New Antioch, which I've got to say is my least favorite of the
Yeah,
things. But I think need to exist in a setting like this, a bit of
definitely. And I mean,
normality.
every war game needs the kind of vanilla faction, and I guess
The
that's what that
Ultramarines.
is. Yeah, they are the kind of the Ultramarines. But again, even despite being my least favorite factions, those mechanized units are, I still think, some of the most classic models out there, really, in the range. There's definitely some of the things that give you the biggest flavor of what the whole kind of thing's about, or at least for me, they were. So,
Yeah.
so yeah, even the shit ranges have got good models.
Yeah, yeah. I think there are so few misses across
Yeah.
those ranges for me. If someone had bought, if my nan had turned up with any of those boxes for Christmas, I wouldn't have to pretend to be excited. But I guess we should talk about where the models come from in this new game and IP, because this is probably, if we've said there's some similarities to GWIP,
Hmm.
perhaps, there's certainly a big difference here, right?
Well, this will be news to me actually, Welshy, because I don't know how you get the models either. Is it a 3D
Oh, right.
printing thing?
So the rules, as you said earlier, the rules exist online, accessible online for free
Hmm.
forever, they have said. That is their
Okay.
intention from the start of this game, the three main guys. And I think that those rules have been around for a while in this kind of playtest beta format. And people have been kit bashing models based on the lore and based on these images, some of the wonderful, beautiful art in the old, like, I'm gonna say it, properly hand drawn art,
Hmm.
like done the old fashioned way. None of this, we've got to get 40 codices out a year, like rushed coloured in rubbish that you see pumping out of Games Workshop these days. The art is beautiful, so people have been inspired to make models. And I think people have just been making their own models for a long time and playtesting these rules. But the guys who came up with the concept, their intention was always to release this as a starter box. You can get a
Hmm.
starter box, you can buy a warband designed as they intended it to be. And that's what the Kickstarter is. So the way that they launch the main thing is through Kickstarter, and you can pledge different amounts of money to get anywhere from one to all of the warbands um, designed by the guys that are involved based on the artwork that's involved. And that Kickstarter, I believe, is now closed. But the difference going forward is that although there are now official models for all of this, for every single model, they tell you the base size and fully support and encourage you to like even never buy the models. The way that they phrase
Hmm.
everything is like, we literally don't care if you don't really buy the models. Maybe buy some to support the fact that this
Yeah.
game exists. Like that'd be nice.
Yeah.
But we're not going to throw you out if you've kit bashed your own thing,
Hmm.
providing it's on the right base size, because I think that's important
Right.
for the way
Right.
the game
Yeah.
works.
Yeah.
That is very different.
I mean, that is very different. But is this maybe the hubris of a company that's just been given 3 million quid when they wanted 60K?
Yeah,
Do you
it's
know what I
true.
mean? It's like, how long is this going to last? Because surely that doesn't seem like a sustainable business model to be like, hey, yeah, we'll give the rules away for free. And the models, whatever, we don't care. Do you know what I mean? It's like
Yeah,
but I mean, I guess that the kind of the logic behind it is, certainly seems to be happening at the moment, is that the models speak for themselves. Do you know what I mean? And
yeah,
people will buy the models because they're fucking cool, and they'll use the models. And as long as they're making models with a broad enough scope, they can be used in other games as well. Then who cares if you're downloading the rules? So I get that
yeah.
as an
I also
idea.
think, like, in reality, if you were to take the average 40K player, I don't think, when it comes to models, I don't think us on the podcast are your average 40K player. We are quite happy to spend weeks kit bashing a single model.
Mm,
But for the average tabletop gamer, I don't think they want to kit bash 20 models. I think
yeah,
they'd rather just buy them. And I think that they're relying on the fact their models are so good, people are going to do that.
yeah.
I think the big risk for them, and something I didn't mention just then, and again, a huge break from Games Workshop, is that you can also pledge on the Kickstarter, slash, I assume in the future, buy, purchase the STL files. So they
Mm,
are fully saying, like, they are fully behind the 3D printing revolution with this stuff.
mm.
You can
Yeah,
buy them,
I
and
think
I
that
hope
it,
their legal team is good enough to chase down people that are getting them or selling them black market
yeah,
online.
yeah, definitely. I mean, it definitely makes sense. I think that I was kind of thinking about this the other day, that like if Games Workshop was to have started today, it would,
Yeah.
how much of it would be 3D printing based? You know what I mean? Like, I mean,
Especially
obviously,
considering their political bent and leanings in the 80s when it came out. I mean,
mm,
they weren't exactly the capitalist juggernaut thinkers that they are
no,
now, you know.
exactly, yeah, yeah. So yeah, so I guess we'll just have to wait and see what happens. We'd love to know if you've actually got some Trench Crusade models. Do let us know in regards to quality and stuff because they look good, but who knows? Maybe they're all made of butter or something like
Yeah,
that. Who can say?
I'm sure they would be good. But the other thing which we were talking about before the show, because I think we've got some intentions maybe to. Well, I know you've been inspired to design some of your own
Well,
STL
that's it.
files
I've
that are
I've
similar
made
thing.
some. Like honestly, but well, I'm hoping by the time this podcast is out, the Trench Crusade models will actually be out. But I've just Welshy has just recently brought my attention to the fact that it's that I've mentioned Trench Crusade quite a lot in the video and things, and they're not massively up for that. So we're going to have
Well,
to think about that.
yeah, I think they're certainly more up for it than Games Workshop are, but I
Mm,
think there's a line. They had a press release as part of the Kickstarter that was essentially, well, kind of we've realized what this has become, and as a result, now we need to try and protect our IP to some extent, but we're not going to be dicks about it. Essentially, they were saying we want to protect our IP because we put a lot of time and effort into this, but we're not going to be dicks about it. So if you're going to make stuff for people to use in this game, at least ask us if you want
mm,
to call it Trench Crusade. If you want to say, here's some cool World War One style military sorcerers, I don't think they're bothered. But
mm.
if you market it as that, they'd like to okay it first, which I think is fair enough. You can't imagine like sending a model to Games Workshop and
Those
getting a reply.
motherfuckers. I take it all back. Forget Trench Crusade. They're stifling my creativity. Yeah,
So
no, fair enough.
but it seems like they really are still interested in community development. And I actually think, Stoney, that Red Brigade thing that you mentioned, that
Mhm.
was like a side Kickstarter that was on that third tier. Contact them and they'll give you support and really try and push stuff that they like out there to the community with the
Mm,
Trench Crusade logo, even if it's not designed by the original team. And I
mm.
think that's what that little Red Brigade box set was. It was a community developed but license agreed kit essentially
Oh,
by the
wicked.
people at Trench Crusade. So
Oh, sweet.
yeah. So yeah, I'm fully excited by it. I like the setting. I'm sure to kit bash a few models. I'm looking forward to painting whatever you design and talking people through that process
Mm.
and have a game. I looked at the rules. Have you looked at the rules at all?
I know
To
a bit about them. It's negative and positive dice or something, isn't it? So you roll the
yeah,
dice and take it away, or yeah.
it seems to be more the game style seems to be more like passing D12 tests.
Hmm.
Um, so kind of more like almost like a dark heresy fight
Okay.
scene.
Right.
I would say it's like there's not strength and toughness in the same way. It's not dice versus dice. It's
Mm.
I'd like to do this thing. I have to pass a
Can
test,
I do it?
and then
Yeah.
there's negative and positive modifiers
Yeah.
on said test, which
Mm.
I think when you get your head around it will make games very quick. And you can
Mm.
basically do all of the actions. So you could run, move, charge, shoot. You keep going until you've done everything once, or the mechanic that stops you is there's the risky actions, and if you fail a risky action, it goes to the next player. So it's
Mm.
individually activated.
That's
One
right.
player
So it's
moves one thing, one
one
player moves
squad and the
another.
other squad. Yeah. So that
Like
you don't
Kill
have.
Team.
So you don't have these crazy long turns. Yeah.
Exactly.
Um.
It's basically Kill Team. If I was to try and sum it up, I would say Kill Team, but with role-playing game rules.
Okay. Oh wow. I
Yeah,
mean, yeah, it definitely
that
sounds
kind of thing.
interesting. So
Yeah.
we'll have to get some game going when we can finally download all the ripped off models we've acquired on. I mean, oh no, I mean once we can finally get some models together or something.
Whip diddy zap, the zip dip the wap. This is what I call the zip zap rap.
So yeah, we've done as you've come to expect from the Large Blast slash Deep Trench podcast, a very bad job of explaining a lot of the lore that has come along. But there is a plethora of it, like we say. It's really interesting because it draws on stuff from real life alternative history and all this kind of stuff. So you'll always see these little nods to things that you might recognize from history or esotericism or something and be like, hey, yeah, that's kind of cool. And that's so definitely worth looking into if you're interested in the lore.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so much bigger than what we've managed to touch upon today, and I think we'll get bigger and bigger. I think the takeaway is if any time we moan about GW, looking too cartoony and not grim dark enough, you've gone, oh yeah, I agree, and stroked your neck beard and thought, God, I remember the good old days of Games Workshop. Spend some time Googling Trench Crusade
Yeah,
because I don't think you'll regret it.
definitely. And and the other thing is it's a really excited community. You know, everybody's really
Mm.
like down with the game. They're all really pleased for them making the money, love the models and everything. And so at the moment, it is one of those kind of things where you can go on to a Reddit forum and ask a fucking stupid question, and everyone will be like, "Hey, I'm happy to help you," rather than call you a dick or whatever, like it is
Yeah.
now. So in a lot of like Warhammer stuff. So it hasn't had time to develop a really, really toxic fan base yet. So it's still a nice, friendly place to be. So it's never been a better time to try to get into Trench Crusade. Well, thanks very much for joining us. We'll see you next time, where we'll be back talking about our beloved Warhammer 40,000. I've been Stoney, and I've been joined by Welshy.
Getting sucked into the circle of hell.
We'll speak to you next time. Bye.